They had arrested him. And I said, "Is he the guy?" And he said, "Yeah." He didn't have any cuts or scrapes. He had one bruise in the middle of his forehead. But that's all it took. They can all three survive here without me. I found out later he was reaching for his phone, so he never saw Kyle's truck and rear ended him. His head hit the steering column. So the friend that was with him called and said, "Miss Johnson, there's been an accident." How? I was literally just on the phone with him. He said, "I could hear you calling his name on the phone." So Kyle's roommate moved here with him. I went down into the basement. They were both taking over the basement. I went down the basement and woke him up and told him what happened. And he said, "I'll drive. You don't drive." And he was so upset that I told him, I said, "Pedro, calm down." So I called someone to come to the house with Lauren. I said, "Lauren is in that bedroom dying. My God is not going to take Kyle. He might be banged up a lot, but my God is not going to take Kyle while Lauren is dying. This is not a Tyler Perry movie. This is our lives. This is not going to happen." I, I firmly believe that. And I prayed through the whole time. We came up on the accident scene and I saw his truck. But I'm still in management mode because feelings mode would have taken me completely out. And I said to the officer, "How is he?" And he said, "Ma'am, you should get to the hospital." The other guy was in the police truck. They had arrested him. And I said, "Is he the guy?" And he said, "Yeah." And I started towards him, and the officer said, "Stop, ma'am. Go to the hospital." But even at the hospital, Kyle was just laying there peacefully. He didn't have any cuts or scrapes. He had one bruise in the middle of his forehead. But that's all it took. We prayed and prayed, and I bargained. I did everything you think you're going to do if something happens to one of your kids. I bargained, I bargained, I bargained. I told the Lord, they can all three survive here without me. I have set them up. I can come home. But you cannot. You can't take two kids at one time. How is that possible? But my other son had come, and a couple of people that we talked to. I didn't even call my mom, who was here in town, because she had come up to be with Lauren. I told my sister to come to the house because there had been an accident. Kyle had been in an accident, and I needed to go to the hospital to check on him. But I prayed and prayed and prayed. And I was sitting in the window in the hospital room. The window was behind his bed. Probably been there at that point a good 10 hours. And just sitting in that windowsill, I had a conversation with my husband. And I said, is this it? And I just felt that thing I felt the night he died. And so I said in the windowsill, Kyle, you don't have to stay. At this point, you've seen your dad and you miss him. And we will be okay. We will be okay. You can go ahead and go. We will be fine. You go ahead and go. When they came back throughout the day, they would do little things to him. They would tap on his foot and it would move, it would wiggle. They would move his tube and he would struggle. They pulled the tube out and he did nothing. So I knew it was gone. And Kev said he knew it too. So they said they wanted to do one more test to find any brain activity. And after that test, then they would know. And they came back and said there was no brain activity. And that they would be calling it. And I said, okay. Okay. So after they left out of the room, I went to the foot of his bed. And I thought, I was just going to pray over him again. But I remember letting out a blood curdle scream. It was the first time I had felt anything. And I remember that my cousin and my daughter-in-law shook. I remember looking up and seeing them shaking at me losing it like that. Not because they didn't think I should, but because they were shocked by it, And so I said in my prayer at that time, into your hands, I commit my baby into your hands. I thank you for the 21 years of life that we were given with him. I thank you for everything about this child. And I appreciate you letting him come to this world through me. He was such a cool kid. He was such a cool kid. As handsome as they come. And just happy. Just happy. So his friend Pedro, who had been with us all day, he said to me, Miss Johnson, we had this conversation just recently. He said, I don't know why we were talking about it. But Kyle said, I live a happy life. I live a happy life. If I had to leave here tomorrow, I would be okay because I live a happy life. I never thought I would get that kind of answer about Kyle. He was a tattoo kid. Tattoos everywhere. Just whole side, just tattoos, right? And while he was laying there in the bed, I said to Kev and Pedro, I said, when did that boy add all those stupid tattoos on himself? I can't wait till he wakes up so I can slap him for getting all that stuff on him. His latest tattoo said, "Let it be." You guys can't see this, but after his passing, I'm not a tattoo person, but I got "Let it be." And I try to remember that because that's how he handled things. Just let it be. It's not that deep. Just let it be. And so at 5:05, they pronounced him. And we just kind of, it's like we had all day to prepare for it. All day we sat at his bedside and we watched him slowly. So I thought, God, you got one more chance here. You got one more chance. They said, would you like to donate his organs? Yes. Because I have a daughter dying. Can we have his liver for Lauren? And I got excited for a minute. And they said, we will do what we can. I put them on because we were at Sinai Hospital in Baltimore, and Lauren's work had all been done at Hopkins in Baltimore. And they put you together with her oncology team, and you guys talk and handle it. And I don't appreciate you taking my son to do this, but you got an opportunity for another miracle here. And it wasn't until the oncology team called me and said, we're sorry, but it wouldn't be a viable fit. She wouldn't make it through surgery. And that's when everything went out. That's when everything went out. And so when we finally left the hospital, we had to go home and tell Lauren. And there were people here at the house with her that had been waiting for us to come home all day, and food already started coming in. I don't know what we do about food because no one wants to eat. I didn't want to eat. We had so much food coming in already. And Kevin and Luli, my daughter-in-law, and I went into Lauren's room and we closed the door and we told her. And she just kind of looked straight ahead. And she said, well, did you call Denise? And I said, yeah, I'd already called Denise. She said, see if you can get a 2-for-1 special. I went,
like, this is not fried chicken.
oh my God. And 11 days later, I had gone to Denise's. I had gone up to Rollins to take Kyle's clothes and all of that good stuff. And again, I had another one of those moments when I had been talking, I'd been rushing. Before that, I had gone to take Kyle's clothes, and my sister and I went out to eat afterwards. And we just talked. And when I came home, Kevin and my aunt were here with Lauren. And I, just asked, when does she get her pain meds again? And he's like, she's been restless all day. And I said, wow. He says she's not communicating anymore. But it was quiet in the house. And it was the first time it was quiet since Kyle passed. People weren't here. And that was my first sign that this was going to be the night, because it was so quiet. And I was so tired. And somebody knocked on the door, and I went, oh. But it was her girlfriend who had driven 3 hours from the Eastern Shore. She said, I have a prayer cloth that I like to bring. Okay. So she went in the room. I told her I'd been out all day. I'm going to just sit out on the sofa. If you need me, that's where I'll be. But then I heard Lauren grunting a lot, like, you know. So I go back in the room, and I would go to her and say, you okay? Do you need anything? And I had made her one promise about her passing. The only thing she would talk about, I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel pain. Just know what I need and take care of it, please. So I called my son. He said, yeah, now is a good time to give her the morphine, because we were so adamant about not overlapping time. He said, yeah, now is a good time. So I gave her just a small dose of the morphine, and she kind of quieted down. I went out of the room, and she did it again. She was saying goodbye. So I go back in the room, and this time her friend Ebony says, well, let's go ahead and pray while I'm here. And we put the prayer cloth on her, and Ebony told her about the ladies in the church that prayed over the cloth before she brought it and all that stuff. And I took her by the hand and took Ebony's other hand, and Ebony prayed. But I felt her hand slip. And when she finished praying and we opened our eyes, she was gone. She was gone. And I've been trained through the whole hospice care. I told Ebony, who wasn't trained, and this was the first time she had been to see her because she lived 3 hours away. And I told her, I said, honey, Lauren's gone. And she, what? Just calm down. She's gone. And she said, no, Miss J, you don't know. I said, give me that mirror. We already had a mirror set up. And we put the mirror under her nose. I checked her pulse. And I did that same prayer again at the bottom of her bed. Into your hands, I commit her spirit.
That's beautiful.
It is, isn't it? It is. And, yet I didn't want to tell anyone she passed.
Time. And horrible all at the same time.
Right. I didn't want people to know. It was the strangest thing. I did not want to tell anyone that she passed. I didn't want that pity. I didn't want that pity. We hadn't buried Kyle yet. I did not want that pity. And we didn't tell people, tell you the truth. Someone saw the coroner, saw the hearse pull up. And that's how people found out. Because I called my mom and my sisters, and I told them to stop by the house. That's what I said. I said, hey, what are you guys doing? Can you stop by the house? Because I couldn't say it. And when they got here, they knew. So, but through all of this, it is unsurmountable. It really is. But I do know, trust, and believe that I never walked through any of it alone. I never went through any of it alone. That God was by my side the entire time. That He was with each one of them. When Lauren passed, I could feel Kevin and Kyle just overhead. I could feel that. I could feel that we were not in that room alone. It wasn't just Ebony, Lauren, and I in that room. That she was not ushered alone. Um, that God honored her prayers and ours, and that even through all of this, He loves me. Now, maybe that's an audacious statement, but I believe that. I believe it. I've had moments where I was just tired. I had moments where I was tired. And even in those moments, an anchor was sent. You know, the day that Denise called me and said, I'm starting this cohort, is for people who have grieved. And I think that was March. Lauren and Kyle hadn't been gone a year. I was like, Denise, are you serious? And she said, no, I think this will be good for you. I could care less about helping anybody else about right now. I can barely make it through a day on my own. You want me to help somebody? I can't help nobody. I can't even help me.
Facts.
And she said, no, just come. Just come. And that was a lifeline that I don't think she would ever understand, you know. And then she gave me my first coach, and that was Jazz. And I was so rough. I'm still rough around the edges. I just, and I laughed. I told my son, Denise and put some sweet lady with me. I probably make that lady crazy every time she gets off the phone with me. But
No, not at all. It was I felt like it was perfectly aligned. And Denise has a really good eye for who matches with who. And it's not just story. I think it goes deeper than the story. And I don't think you even realize how much your story was impacting me.
no, I had no idea.
Yes, ma'am.
I had no idea.
Simultaneously. Yes. Because every time I hear you share it, um, I'm always in awe. Like our faith journeys, while my faith felt like it was anchored in that, okay, God, I know you're real. I still believe in your word, but then how do I do it? Whereas I can see how, your stance, even though it was never wavered in God. Of course, there's always questions we have when things like this happen,
Yeah.
but just the consistency of your faith. I love that. But also, while you might find it as a point of, I should have been better at allowing myself to feel, you were by yourself. You were doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
I could fall apart because my husband was the manager. But that other half of you was already gone, so you had to be both, and only one of these can operate at a time.
Right.
And so to see that you were like, okay, there was a time, and it was like the Lord knew. He had already put people in your path that would allow you to have this experience where you could manage the logistics and be who you needed to be in order to survive, and then a time where you could, okay, now you can feel, because now it's safe for you to feel. It wouldn't have been
Right.
safe for you to feel maybe before, because who knows what you would have done with those feelings. You might have taken it
Right.
out on your kids if you'd allowed yourself to feel. But now in this place, it's like, okay, let's unpack,
Yeah.
And so I feel like that, to me, when I see that, I'm like, okay, so my next, because this is life, right? And that
Right.
means that just because I had gone through something difficult doesn't mean that something else is not awaiting me in the future. And so sometimes I find myself trying to prepare for the next difficult thing. Like, okay, don't forget the lessons you learned, but also I'm gleaning from your story. Like, there is a time to be emotional, and there's a time to put the emotion aside just so you can deal with the situation.
Yeah. I had 2 funerals to plan for, and I had people. Now I get short tempered. We're gonna call it what it is. I get real short tempered, and when I'm in that mode, I just did not want, appreciate, or like other people's opinions at all. At all. I
You're not
probably
alone.
I had a brick wall around me. I didn't want anybody telling me anything. Get out of my way because this is how I'm going to survive. I'm going to handle all of this, and you're not going to get in my way. Except Lauren had a group of friends when she was in college that liked to tell people what to do. And the worst thing one of those little girls did was start to plan my daughter's funeral.
That's a big no-no. Big no-no. That's a big boundary crosser right there.
She had called for pallbearers and had them all set up.
Oh my goodness.
It was crazy the amount of, and she said she had done it because she knew I was busy with Kyle's. So, and in my way, I can be biting. And so I told her, well, then let me send you the receipt for Denise Rollins and Rollins Life Center since you're doing so much. I can fax it to you momentarily. Which one would you like? Would you like to get out of my way, or would you like to pay this bill?
And I'm sure, and I think that's the hard thing with grief is like, and I hate to call it just one word grief because I feel like that one word encapsulates so many other emotions.
Yeah.
I say the word, but we all know what I mean. But during that time, there is a sensitivity. Emotions are so raw that anybody who is meaning to do well, meaning to say well, when it comes through that grief filter, it comes through like, what did you just say to me? It's like,
I don't know that their grief actually removes the filter.
Right.
that's true. That's the truth. Yes.
And I was asked, even by the church, I was asked, would you like to have the two funerals together? No. No. I thought, I can't even imagine two caskets in one room. Like, there's no room big enough for that for me. For me. And so I had to explain to everyone they lived completely different lives. And, but they did tell me, we're thinking about you. Would it be easier for you? No, 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 no. And plus, the one thing I learned about grief is the easiest way to hurt yourself is to make it about you.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Huh?
Can you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean?
Yeah, because once you make it about you, then you're dealing with all of your feelings. If I had have considered making it about me, I don't even think then I would have wanted two together. But everyone thought that would be easier for me. But it wasn't about me. And I didn't want to, because once I made a decision like that, I could never take that back. I would never be able to take the moments back. I felt like I would have watered down their homegoing celebration to suit myself. I couldn't make it about me. If I made it about me too, then the sorrow would have taken over, because that would have been sorrow over me. That would have been the sorrow that I felt for me.
Like self-pity?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So grief is something, and in my opinion, grief is something that's going to always be. It's like before you have children, before you get married, your heart is in one tact. When you fall in love, your heart stretches. When you start having children, your heart stretches. When these people are removed from your life, that stretching doesn't go back.
There's a hole.
There's a hole. There's a hole, and that hole is always going to be there. There is nothing you can do to change it. I believe I had to understand that. And there were times, and still are times, where it goes from being grief to sorrow. I think they're two different things. Grief and I just chilling on the couch, you know. Sorrow will take me under.
Mhm.
Sorrow will take me under. And I don't feel sorrow for my family that are living in a land of milk and honey. I don't feel sorrow for them. I can only feel sorrow for me.
I'm actually jealous.
See, that's what I say too. I told you before. You know, when things were going wrong with the house, I would say to my husband, "You up there under some palm tree in the land of milk and honey, and meanwhile here at the house, everything is falling apart." Gee, thank you very much. You know?
Exactly. Uh-huh.
But yeah, I learned the night that Kevin died. My faith had been preparing me for anything that came my way, right? And that anything was the greatest loss, because it wasn't just the loss of my husband, it was the control that I tried to have over my life.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, it definitely, if nothing else, a sudden loss like that definitely helps you understand you have no control.
None.
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 So I understood that plainly that day.
In some
And I
ways, it's a
understood
little
it when my
extreme.
kids.
In some
Yeah.
ways, it's a little extreme.
God is still in control. He already has a plan. He does not need to get an okay from me, because
Mhm.
he wouldn't have if he had asked. But I believe that everyone comes here, no matter whose womb you come through, you come here with your time. And for my son Kyle, that felt so in place. It hurt, but I felt in that moment he was so good, that he was catching up, that he and Kevin were together. But then the night Lauren died, I felt like, oh, Kyle is coming back to get Lauren, because Kyle is so carefree and just loving life. That's who he was, carefree and loving life. He's coming back to say, Lauren, it's okay. Come on, let's go. You got to go now. I'll
It's a
be with you.
beautiful way of looking at it.
And that's,
But Denise, I have a question for you. One of the things that you had said was that after Kyle passed, you were sure that God was going to restore Lauren. Because surely God's not going to take two of your kids.
that's what I thought.
So, how did that impact your faith, and how did you recover
It
from
didn't,
that
it,
blow?
yeah, it didn't impact my faith. It just I felt defeated.
Okay.
I felt defeated.
And what does that mean? You felt defeated because there was nothing you could do.
I felt like this is going to happen no matter what you are trying to will.
Yeah. That's that lack of control.
That's the lack of control. That's the
What,
lack of control.
what I find interesting in your story as well as mine, and that part has always intrigued me about your story, Denise, where you're like, God wouldn't let this part happen, and that part is just so relatable. Um, be it from loss, job loss, divorce, sickness, surely God wouldn't, right? And I feel like one of the things that we are, taught from little kids in church, is how protected we are because of our relationship with the Lord, how things wouldn't happen because of who you are in God. And this control that you have by simply rebuking a demon, a spirit, of this, of that. And so it gives this, I don't want to call it an illusion of control, because I do feel like we do have authority, but also at the same time, it's authority submitted to the will of God. And I think that's the part that we don't, that isn't really highlighted or brought to the forefront, is the surrender part.
Yeah.
And that's the humility of surrendering and submitting. Okay, God, you are ultimately the authority. And, I know my mom, when I was little, we would say before we would go to bed, I'll see you in the morning, Lord's will. And we got that from James when he says, don't say if you're going to do this or that. You say if it be the Lord's will that you'll do this or that, right? And so we were taught that as kids. And then when I grew up and I started hearing different teachings, it was like, don't say if it be the Lord will, because it's always God's will to heal. Don't say that if it be God's will for this, because it's always God's will. So then my mind changed and say, oh, well, it's bad to say that because it sounds like it's doubt. And then you don't want to have doubt, right? Because the formula says if you want to see faithful, these sorts of results, here's the faith formula. You can't have any doubt or have anything that sounds like it. But here's the thing, is that what someone might say is doubt is actually maybe surrender.
Yes.
I'm not doubting. I'm just saying God's bigger than me.
Right.
And when we say to pray, that's me putting in a request. He has the ability and the option to say no. But I'm only saying that now because of what I went through.
Exactly. That was probably the biggest thing that I heard after losing my husband so suddenly, was it was all about surrender. Because the one thing that was weird that gave me comfort was being able to say, God, you weren't surprised by this. I was. But you weren't surprised.
Right.
You knew.
You knew.
And so it was a matter of surrendering to his will, surrendering to his plan, surrendering, okay, as you said, Denise, it was like this was his time. I didn't see it coming, but, God wasn't surprised at all by
Right.
this. And so it's surrendering to him in that.
Yeah.
And
When
it's
I'm
about surrender. And to this day, after 3 years, that's still my prayer every day. I surrender. I give you my future. I surrender my future. I surrender everything. I surrender it all. It's all yours.
Yeah.
Not my will, thy will be done.
Yes.
That's what it
I
all
think,
boils down to.
yeah, I think too, what I found I can totally relate on is when you say God was with me the entire time, right? Now, if I wanted to be cynical, and this is not just for your story, it's for my story. Well, God, if you was there, then come on now, change something. You're almighty, all powerful, like you're with me, so change something. But I think that's the other kind of the side of the ditch too, is, God is with me. And I remembered, I said, well, God, where were you when David was walking up the stairs to go do what he was about to go do? And I really felt like the Lord said, he said, I was there. And I think that's the coming to terms or coming to peace with. Like, there's nowhere we're going to go that God isn't. So he's going to be in every situation and every scenario that has happened. He sees, he knows, he's aware. And it's the, I don't want to say it's the acceptance of the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because the part of us is wanting to know, well, why? Well, why? And we will search and find meaning that suits, that adds the kind of some salve to the wound. And there have been some answers that God has given me for my story that adds just kind of put some peace over it. But there's still that element of mystery that we won't know till we get to the other side, and learning to still hold on, or maybe not learning to still hold on, but just it's a maintaining of the faith without the answers.
Yeah. That's the thing. Because is it faith if you have the answers?
Come on.
You know,
Because
is
it,
it faith if
God
you
could
have the answers?
God could sit down with you and explain the why, all give you all the answers, but the chair's still empty at the table.
And you know what I came to the conclusion of when Kevin passed, because I was definitely seeking answers. Um, but like I always got, like I said, from that moment, made it real clear that I am still in control. I still love you. But I tell you, the sense that I also got when Kevin passed was, you married him. I created him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's so much more connected here than just y'all's little wedding.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there are things lined up in the heavens that are going to play out, Denise, whether you like it or not. And you just you just gotta hold on and hold on to me and trust me.
That's right.
You just gotta
Yeah.
trust me. And that's what it all boils down to. I trust him. I tell you, I'd still it still shakes me when I hear other people survive the same cancer that Lauren
Yeah.
didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to check myself often
Mm-hmm.
about that. I have to check myself often. Like, it's good for them to survive if they're meant to survive. Their survival isn't anything against Lauren's departure. But that's not easy all the time.
I'm sure you've experienced the same thing that I've seen couples, you know, whether they're sitting in church or I see them at the mall or whatever. It's a couple that's older than us, you know, and but they're still together. And it was like, now why do they get to stay together, you know, and we didn't, you know?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. It was like, I don't know why, and even if I knew why, I don't know that that would make that much of a difference because he's still gone,
Right.
you know. But and I had a friend stop over shortly after my husband passed away, and I think it surprised her. But I was talking, we were talking about it, and I said, you know, even if God gave, you know, God or somebody gave me the choice to have him come back, I said, I wouldn't do it. And she was like, really? And I said, that would be the most selfish thing I could do.
Right.
And with what he's experiencing, and I want him to come back here, you know?
That's
And so,
see, I think the same thing. I think they're like, no.
yeah,
You wait till you get
yeah,
here. I because how do we spend this much time in the Lord and then we praise, we worship, we read the word. Everything is about after this life.
that happened to me, like, once again, shortly after my husband had passed away, and I had a really hard time. I needed complete quiet. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't, you know, I needed, and I was finally getting back to, you know, when I was in the car, I would have the radio, I turned the radio on, and I had a Christian radio station playing, and so, and I'm sure it was the spirit that drew me to paying attention to. I just started noticing one song after another. Every song was about going to heaven. Every song was about going to heaven, and it was like, and I then once I finally got that, that got my attention, and I noticed it. I heard the Lord say to me, He says, "Isn't that the end goal for everybody?" He said, "You know, Dan just graduated before you did, you know." But isn't that the end goal? Like you said, that's we read our Bible, we pray. The whole thing is to go to heaven, you know, to be with Him.
Yeah. I think that is the interesting thing. It's like I feel like when we lost David, it made scriptures come alive in a way I'd never seen them before.
Yeah.
And so instead of my life being about the fish and the loaves, so to speak, it became so much. And I remember talking to my counselor, and people still wanted me to coach, even though I'm like, don't y'all see how broken I am? Like, I didn't even really feel qualified to coach at that time. And I said, my coaching is different. I was telling my counselor, I said, my coaching is different. So everything is kind of different. And I'm so thankful for him, because he was like, 'cause I'm thinking I'm losing it, like, just I'm off. And he said, is it deeper? And I said, yeah. I said, I feel like when I listen to people, I'm listening on a level I've never listened to them. Like, it's a different frequency.
Yeah.
And I said, even with God, it feels different. He said, and is that deeper? I said, I think it is. And so and so even though I didn't pick up my Bible as much during that time, like I did, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't
Right.
like I was just trying to check it off a list. I wasn't just trying to let me do my morning coffee with Jesus. Like, it wasn't, it wasn't shallow. It wasn't superficial. It was it was really about the connection. It was really about understanding this life and what his message was. And it is about eternal life. It's not about how many blessings can I stack up and rack up and how popular, like all of that seems, it took a way back seat.
Got much,
I'm sorry.
got much richer.
It got much richer, much richer. The hope became much more real. The faith became much more tangible. Yeah, it just got better in a lot of ways. So we've covered so much goodness, and there's so much in your story, Denise, that we could pull out. But I would like to lead people to your book. You just wrote a book called Surviving Goodbyes, which I love the title of it. Can you tell us where we can find it and when it will be available?
It should be available within the next 2 weeks on Amazon. There is a title, the same title I just realized out there, but you'll notice the difference.
Yeah.
Um, and so in that, I thought about a lot of different goodbyes
Mm-hmm.
in life, and so I shed some pain in that book.
Mm-hmm.
I shed some pain. It took me almost a year to write it because I could write something, and that's when I started feeling.
Mm.
When I started writing, I started feeling. Um, but I wrote about some different things, different goodbyes I had in my life, not just of my family, but as a young girl, I had been molested, and it was the first time I dealt with it,
Wow.
the very first time. But I also put in there some things that I would think will help other people, especially if you have someone that's going through grief. I have some please do nots. I have some please don'ts in there, and ways that you can help someone who is going through grief, and ways that someone who is going through grief can allow people to help them.
That's
You
really
know,
good to get both sides and both perspectives
yeah,
of
to
that.
see
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
And I also have statements from other mothers who have experienced grief, and they talk about how they have gotten through it through Christ, because that's my story. But for the love of God, but for the love of God.
Denise, we are so honored to have you here to share your story, and I'm so blessed to hear the outcome of what God's doing in your life and how
Yes,
it's going to touch other people. You know, whatever the enemy means for evil, God's going to use for good.
that's
So
right.
he may put it back together. It may not look like it did originally, but he's going to make something beautiful out of this. And that's what he's doing here. And I thank you so much for being here and honoring us with your presence and with your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, yes. And Denise will be, well, you say 2 weeks, so just to kind of give people a time frame, that's May of 2025 that it will be
Yes.
available on Amazon. And Denise is also going to be joining us for our November conference, our Monday Morning Glory or Morning Glory conference in November, November 15th. That's going to be in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. And she's going to be talking about commemorating our loved ones. And she's so creative. She's come up with so many different unique ways to commemorate her kids. And she's worked with a couple of people in finding ways that they can commemorate their loved ones. So you'll definitely want to come out and just hear, how to continue to express love. Whether you're a kid, a teenager, adult, just different ways that we can continue to express that love for our loved ones. So you don't want to miss her coming to share about that. Denise, how would someone get in touch with you if they wanted to connect with you, if they wanted to be coached by you? How would they get in touch with you?
So for coaching, I coach through Whole Heart Center in Frederick. And you can reach me there through info@wholeheartcenter.org. Or if you just want to talk or text, you can reach me on my cell phone at 202-236-9862. I'm working on websites and things like that, but in the meantime, anyone who feels a need to just have a conversation and just understand that through Christ you can do it all, I'm willing to talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Denise. And we really appreciate having you. And if you all are interested in coming to the Morning Glory Conference, you can check that out on my website at jasmuglore.com. And you can also reach out to Mary. She'll share her information now, too.
You can reach me at my email is empoweredlivinglc@gmail.com. And my website is empoweredlivinglifecoaching.net.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, ladies. And you all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.